Hey everyone, welcome back to another video on my channel. Hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. I do really appreciate the support. And today, instead of a gameplay video, I'm gonna do one of my top 10 videos. So we are going to be talking today about the top 10 Explorer and Pioneer cards in Tarkir Dragonstorm. And, I think it's worth just saying how nice it is to have like a real Magic set for a change. Nobody's wearing a stupid hat, nobody's in a car. It just feels like actual Magic. And it may be the last one that does this for quite a while, so we should probably make the most of it. So yeah, without further ado, let's take a look at some of the best cards from this set for these two formats, or the same format, if you will, very similar in any case. So we'll start with some honourable mentions. So Descendant of Storms is a 1 white mana 2/1 human soldier. Whenever this creature attacks, you may pay 1 and a white. If you do it endures 1, you can put a +1/+1 counter or on it, or it creates a 1/1 white spirit creature token. So specifically in mono white humans, kind of what these 1 mana 2/1s are always worth paying attention to. And this is a good way of just kind of ploughing some extra mana into either kind of growing this over time or creating a kind of even wider board. Now, the tokens it creates are not humans, unfortunately, but even so, I think it's one potentially worth paying attention to for that particular deck. Similarly, although perhaps not in humans, maybe in a slightly different build, given its mana cost, but Sage of the Skies is a 2/3 with flying and lifelink. For 3, and when you cast this spell, if you cast another spell this turn, copy this spell. So you essentially, if this is the second spell you've cast that turn, you get 2/3 flying lifelinks, which is a pretty damn good rate across 2 bodies. And so if you can double spell and get this onto the battlefield as 2 different creatures, which you're almost certainly going to want to do, then it is a very, very strong creature, and probably playable in that sense. And the next one, Meringue River Regent. So this is one of our Omen cards. So for those who haven't seen, Omens work a little bit like Adventures, except after you cast the Omen side of it, instead of it going on an adventure and going to exile, you shuffle it back into its library, so it does play out slightly differently. And I think this is a potentially fantastic control finisher, because the Omen is 3 and a blue for an instant that says draw 3 cards, then discard a card, and that's a pretty good rate, particularly instant speed. If you think it's kind of almost pseudo Memory Deluge. Memory Deluge lets you look at 4 and choose 2. This lets you draw 3 and then discard any other. So I think those are kind of similar in terms of their power level. And then a dragon is a 6 mana 6/7 with flying, and when this creature enters, return up to 2 other target non-land permanents to their owner's hand. So just very good at clearing away the opponent's board and leaving behind a very powerful 6/7 flying that can quickly close out the game. So that's one to pay attention to. Then another dragon with an Omen ability is Scavenger Regent, so a 4/4 for 4 with flying and ward of discard a card. Graveyard Trespasser is a card which has seen play across these formats over many years, but also has Exude Toxin, which is X black black for a sorcery. Each non-dragon creature gets -X/-X until end of turn. So there's also a board wipe staple to the dragon. Now, it's kind of similar to Meathook Massacre. Yes, it's not as good because of Meathook Massacre's static abilities, but, for a card which you could potentially use more than once, shuffles back into your library, and also could just be a very powerful flying threat, then, yeah, that's pretty good. We've also got Skirmish Rhino, so this is a homage to Siege Rhino, and actually, given its mana cost, might be slightly better. It's a 3/4 for Abzan, so white, black, green. With Trample, when it enters, each opponent loses 2 life, and you gain 2 life. Now, particularly why I think this is a potentially powerful upgrade to Siege Rhino is this can be fetched off Collected Company. So I can imagine a sort of Abzan Company deck that's playing this and some other kind of powerful 3-drops. Could potentially see that. Probably worth a kind of an attempt at testing that in the format. And then one of the most interesting and potentially powerful cards in the set is Mistrise Village, which is one of the rare land cycle. So like all of them, it's a blue land which enters tapped unless you control a mountain or a forest. So it's one colour that with a kind of untapped clause that cares about the other 2 colours in that particular clan, this one being Temur. And also you can pay a blue and tap it, and the next spell you cast this turn can't be countered. Now, we've kind of seen the power of lands like Cavern of Souls. Now, this is in a lot of decks, this isn't as good as Cavern of Souls because that doesn't cost any additional mana, and you really only care about protecting one particular creature type. And also, I think this will be better in older formats where, like, protecting your combo, stopping things being countered is so much more important in formats like Legacy and Modern. But you know, the ability to for 2 mana essentially to just stop anything you cast next being countered does kind of give this a huge amount of potential. And even if it doesn't see play now, I think as more cards get printed into the format, more combos come to the fore, then this will certainly continue to see play. I have no doubt about that. So those are the honourable mentions. Now let's go on and talk about the top 10 itself. So starting up with number 10, we have the Twinmore Stormbrood, which is another Omen creature. You can kind of tell the kind of anticipating that the Omen ability, like Adventure, will be pretty good. So this is 5 and a white flying 5/4. When it enters, gain 5 life. That's not really the interesting bit. The Omen is 1 and a red for a sorcery. Charring Bite deals 5 damage to a target creature without flying, which is basically Roast. Roast strictly better than Roast because it comes attached to a 5/4 flying creature. Now Roast isn't actually on Arena, so it wasn't in Explorer, but isn't actually needed now because this is just strictly better. Now, it's probably mostly a sideboard card like Roast is, but it is a great answer to some of the best creatures in the format. It can kill Shieldrids and that kind of thing. And for Boros aggro decks, there's no reason not to play this because you can constantly be shuffling the Roast back into your library, and occasionally you might make use of the 5/4 with flying that gains 5 life, particularly in kind of grindier matches. If you're kind of duking it out with another aggressive deck and you can get to 6 mana, then this is a pretty powerful life swing. And you know, to be honest, it might even see play in mono red because if you have like incidental treasures flying around, then sometimes you can cast this. And again, the power of this card is not in being able to cast the dragon. You don't really care if you're able to do that. Roast is a very, very good removal spell just by itself. You know, it's. I think this is kind of one which I'm fairly sure will see play at some point. As I say, probably just in the sideboard. But yeah, Roast has been upgraded. Number 9 is Songcrafter Mage. So this is Temur mana, so green, blue, red for a 3/2 with flash. When this creature enters, target instant or sorcery card in your graveyard gains Harmonize until end of turn. Its Harmonize cost is equal to its mana cost. So it's worth saying straight up that despite the similar templating, this is not Snapcaster Mage. Its colour requirements are much more restrictive. It works differently. You know, the power of Snapcaster is that it's just 1 and a blue. It's 2 mana and it's only 1 colour. So this is not it. However, it does synergize very strongly on the face of it with certain very powerful cards in the format, like Collected Company. You know, if you cast Collected Company, put this into play off it, you can then cast the company again, tapping this and paying just 1 green mana. So in many ways, it's kind of company 5/8 in a deck like that. Now, there is a caveat to that, which is that like decks that play Collected Company don't really have many other things that Songcrafter Mage interacts with, because like you need such a kind of critical mass of creatures that there aren't going to be many other instants and sorcery. So it kind of depends on whether that interaction is powerful enough to justify running this card and the kind of colour restrictions that it forces you into. Other cards which cost a lot of generic mana interact very strongly with this. Cards with X mana costs, that kind of thing. And you know, it's likely going to be broken at some point. Somebody will break this. But yeah, worth pointing out that it's not Snapcaster Mage. It interacts differently, but it's a powerful card and will certainly be doing some testing around it. Number 8, we have Surak Elusive Hunter. 4/3 for 3 in green, a legendary human warrior, can't be countered, has trample, and whenever a creature you control or a creature spell you control becomes the target of a spell or ability an opponent controls, draw a card. So this is Shaper Sanctuary slightly upgraded because of that creature spell clause on a stick. It's an aggressively costed creature that's an absolute nightmare for control decks. Can't be countered by itself, comes down pretty early in the game. You know, if they have a Wrath, good for them, but if they're ever trying to target this, you are at least getting a card back. So it does come down slightly later than Sanctuary. and I think it can be more easily interacted with because it's a creature. But it usually will at least draw one card, and in decks which run green, the 4 power on this, triggering Kiora, triggering the Outcast Trailblazer, I think it's called. That kind of interaction is powerful as well. So yeah, this is not a difficult card to slip into a number of decks. Again, might see more in the sideboard for that in that kind of Shaper Sanctuary style. But yeah, I think in a lot of decks you're kind of thinking, should I just replace the Sanctuaries with this instead? Number 7. So this is an interesting one. So this is a kind of relatively innocuous looking uncommon. So it's the Keru Goldkeeper, which is a 3/3 for 1 Sultai mana, so 1 and then black, green, blue. 3/3 with flying. Whenever one or more cards leave your graveyard during your turn, create a treasure token. And that has Renew of 2 and a Sultai mana. Exile it from your graveyard, put 2 +1/+1 counters and a flying counter on target creature. Activate only as a sorcery. The reason this is interesting is that it's kind of got all of its safety valves removed in terms of the things which make these kind of abilities kind of safe, which is they create a tapped treasure token, or they can only be used. It can only trigger once a turn. None of this is here. You can kind of generate some quite easy infinite combos with this, where you're just bringing kind of cards out of your graveyard, using the treasure to bring more cards out of your graveyard, creating more treasure. It's a really interesting ability, and Sultai Dredge is a kind of fringe strategy in the format, but something like this, it's certainly possible to see play. Again, maybe held back by its colour requirements, and I think there'll be quite a lot of that, given that this is a 3-colour set. But yeah, this is it certainly reads very powerfully, and I'd be interested to see again who can kind of break this in half, and I'm sure somebody will. Speaking of Sultai cards, Teval, Arbiter of Virtue. Now, this is an interesting card. So 6/6 for 2 and Sultai mana, so 5 mana in total. Legendary Spirit Dragon, Flying and Lifelink. Spells you cast have Delve, which is one of the most powerful lines of text I've ever read on a Magic card. And whenever you cast a spell, you lose life equal to its mana value. So yeah, that final line is one of the most extreme drawbacks I think I've ever seen. But Delve is also one of the most broken mechanics of all time. If you think about cards like Treasure Cruise, it's just ridiculously powerful. Probably the most powerful card in Explorer and Pioneer. And now all of your spells have it. So yeah, the drawback is real, but you also have to remember that this is a creature that's going to be doing 6 lifelink damage a turn. And that's a pretty big deal, and that unlocks a lot of potential for playing spells while staying life neutral. And this kind of creates potential huge tempo swings. If you think you cast this, you then follow it up with like a 7-drop that just by delving cards from your graveyard. Imagine playing New Ugin after you've played this. It's a lot of life, but it's just an enormous swing in the game. And again, that ability to give all your spells delve, someone's going to break it. They will inevitably break this card. So it might not be in this format, might be in standard, might be in a different format, but it's worth paying attention to, this one. So coming in at number 5, we have Clarion Conqueror, which is a 3-mana dragon, 3/3 with flying. Activated abilities of artifacts, creatures, and planeswalkers can't be activated. Now, it is worth bearing in mind that that's double-sided, so includes yours, which I think is my preferred templating for this kind of card. I think the kind of prison-style card should be double-sided. But yeah, it's extremely aggressively costed hate bear, and it can do a lot of damage by itself. A 3/3 with flying is kind of not to be laughed at. That's a lot of damage coming in the air. And, the ability to kind of shut down any activated ability, and that includes mana abilities, so worth remembering that. Is very, very powerful. Now, shutting down planeswalkers, for example, isn't quite as good as it used to be when there were a lot more planeswalkers in the format. But usually against most opponents, you're going to be able to hit something and make their game plan a lot more difficult. And against some decks, it's just going to completely hose them. And I think one of the reasons this is so high up on the list is because there's an existing deck that this can go in, which is that Selesnya Company deck that kind of has all of the hate bears. This is a kind of a very good card in that deck. Kind of fits the theme of it, can be hit with Collected Company. So I think again, it's one of those cards which may be better in Modern and Legacy, where like that ability to shut down activated abilities of like Mox Opals and various other things is very powerful, but it's going to be able to hit something in almost every matchup. If you think about just being able to shut off the opponent's Teferis in control, or anything like that, it's going to do quite a lot of good work. So yeah, expect to see this. Again, perhaps more in the sideboard, but in a list like Selesnya Company, this is probably good enough as a 3/3 flying that kind of fits the theme of the deck, that you can play it in the main deck, and then maybe sideboard it out if you have better options. But yeah, very, very good. Number 4, another white card, is Sun Pearl Kirin, which is 1 and a white for a 2/1 with flash and flying. When it enters, return up to 1 other non-land permanent you control to its owner's hand. If it was a token, draw a card. Again, this is another one of those where we know that there are strategies that can make use of this. Self-bounce is a relatively recent addition to these formats, but it's one of the strongest decks in the format. And this may push it more towards white. There are kind of different ways you can build that deck. You can build it as Dimir, you can build it as Orzhov, you can build it as Esper, and I think this potentially pushes you quite a lot towards the towards one of the versions that runs white. It does almost exactly the same thing as Fear of Isolation, has a bit less toughness, but does it instant speed, and has the minor upside of potentially bouncing, that should say token, I don't know why it says deck, that's just a typo, bouncing a token to draw a card if you really need it, and that with things like Storm Chaser's Talent and all of the rest of it, there's a lot of incidental tokens that you could potentially use if you really need that extra card. So I suspect this will run up the score more in Standard, but I think has pretty good potential in Pioneer and Explorer as well. Number 3, we have Rot-Cursed Rakshasa. Sorry, I've always struggled with that. So that's a 5/5 for 2 mana. With Trample, it has Decayed, so it can't block. When it attacks, you sacrifice it at the end of combat. Then it has a Renew ability of X and 2 black. Exile it from your graveyard, put a Decayed counter on each of X target creatures. Activate only as a sorcery. So yeah, Ball Lightning now destroys all of your opponent's creatures, because why shouldn't it? It's also a demon, and demons are quite popular. Cheap demons, which cause the Unholy Annex to drain your opponent rather than costing you any life. Pretty good. 5/5, quite hard to kill. And, the Renew ability on it means that if this gets milled or it gets discarded, it's not even a bad thing, because you can just use it as a one-sided board wipe eventually. And essentially allows you to alpha strike your opponent by taking out their ability to block with any of your creatures, and also giving them basically no good attack options in longer games, because as soon as they attack, those creatures are going to die. So yeah, this is a very, very aggressive card, very good in aggressive decks. Yeah, I can see this seeing a lot of play somewhere. Okay, number 2, and shock. You won't be hugely shocked by the number 1 shares a card type with this card. But this is Elspeth Stormslayer, legendary planeswalker. Elspeth, 5 loyalty, 5 mana, has a static ability. If 1 or more tokens would be created under your control, twice that many of those tokens are created instead. That's any token, it's not just creatures. +1, create a 1/1 white soldier creature token. Guess what? That creates 2. 0, put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control. Those creatures gain flying until your next turn. -3, destroy target creature an opponent controls with mana value 3 or greater. So yeah, Anointed Procession. You add 1 more mana to it and you get a whole Planeswalker that comes with it. So yeah, that ability to create 2 soldiers with the +1 is very powerful. We kind of seen that on 6 mana Elspeth. The fact that it spits out 3 tokens was always kind of one of its biggest selling points. Protecting Elspeth becomes much easier when it produces so many creatures. The 0 ability can close out the game incredibly quickly. It's a removal spell with its -3 if you really need it to be. It kind of just does everything, and that kind of interaction of creating kind of more than 1 token, doubling treasures, doubling clues, whatever it might be, is just, yeah, it's one of the most powerful statics that you'll see on a Planeswalker. So that is number 2. And speaking of one of the most powerful statics you'll ever see on a Planeswalker, hello Ugin, Eye of the Storms, which is 7 generic mana for 7 loyalty legendary Planeswalker Ugin. Has the static ability of when you cast this spell, exile up to 1 target permanent that's 1 or more colours, and whenever you cast a colourless spell, exile up to 1 target permanent that's 1 or more colours. +2, you gain 3 life and draw a card. 0, have 3 colourless mana. -11, win the game, basically. Search your library for any number of colourless non-land cards, exile them, and shuffle. Until end of turn, you may cast those cards without paying their mana costs. Yes, this is a lot of mana. 7 mana is a lot in Pioneer, but the power level of this card is off the charts. It's better than Card Liberated in Modern. It's better than 8 mana Ugin, which still sees some play in Pioneer. I mean, just, yes. I mean, this card is absurd. If you can cast this and then follow it up immediately with another colourless spell, which, surprise, surprise, it helps you cast those, it's pretty much good game. You've exiled the 2 most powerful things the opponent does. You've got a 7 loyalty planeswalker hanging around that can draw your cards, do whatever it is you want, and that ability to just trigger its passive every time you cast a colourless spell. So yeah, it probably needs a little bit of building around, but at the same time, I think any ramp deck wants this near its top end. If you've got any colourless spells which can kind of go alongside it, then it's just great. You know, it protects itself with its cast trigger. Also, if the opponent doesn't have targeted planeswalker removal, you bring this down, you plus it. It's got 9 loyalty, for goodness sake. It's so much loyalty for the opponent to have to attack down, particularly after you've probably removed their best creature, or maybe their only creature. So yeah, Ugin Eye of the Storms. It's a lot of mana, and maybe that might prohibit it from seeing lots of play. Maybe. And obviously in Modern, where you have like Tron lands which can assemble 7 mana very quickly, then, you know, that's potentially good. But, you know, in a ramp deck, this could come down turn 5, and good luck trying to win once your opponent's got this on the battlefield. It's just not going to happen. So yeah, Ugin Eye of the Storms, incredibly powerful card, number 1, not surprising. So yeah, that is my list. So yeah, I'm sure you have other thoughts, things that you agree with, things that you disagree with. I'm all about the discussion here, so let me know what you think in the comments. Are there cards that I've missed? I'm sure there will be. You know, we only got the full spoiler a couple of days ago, so, you know, there will be other things floating around which people have spotted, people will be excited to build around, so let me know what those are. And yeah, that is Tarkir Dragonstorm. Massively looking forward to playing with the cards in this set. Looks a great set, the power level's really high. Yeah, really exciting stuff. So, thank you very much for watching. As I say, as ever, like and subscribe. Always appreciate the support, and I will see you next time.